Greetings. Today we're getting into chapter 15 of a Benny song by Djeli Clark. Chapter 15 is entitled Wish Song. And we left off from chapter 14 where Abeni had, well, not only Abeni, all four of them had spent some time in the Vale of Lost Things. Abeni made the decision to move forward. Of course, when she makes a decision as Asha's guardian, that means the two of them are moving forward. And Naomi, as well as Zania, made the decision to accompany them, to stay with them on their journey. So then they were faced with this door that said they all had to agree, not only verbally, but in their heart and their mind too. So all four of them said they wanted to find Asha's sister. And so Abeni's mental space was like, is this what I really want? And that support from little Asha, the spirit, helped Abeni get grounded and focused. And so let's see where the door led them. Chapter 15. Wish Song. Abeni stepped into sunlight. The door had split right down the middle, opening, and they'd all walked through. Under her breath, she kept saying the same thing. Take us to Asha, sister. Take us to Asha, sister. Take us to Asha, sister. In her head, ghost ships, storm women, and the man with the goat horn mask still called to her, but she pushed them back. She'd given her word to get everyone to Asha's sister. Taking them someplace else wouldn't have been right. Hopefully she hadn't also given up the chance to see her friends and family again. Glancing back through the door, she made out the veil. On the other side, Tutuo was there. He waved to them beside the giant salamander whose body had turned into a clear glass that reflected the sun in a rainbow. She waved back just as the door closed and disappeared. Well, Naomi breathed in relief. We're here. And where is that exactly? Zania asked dubiously. Abeni wasn't certain. She lifted a hand to shield her eyes. The sun here was very bright. It sat big and full in a blue sky without a single cloud, looking like a hot round ball. They stood on a wide, flat plain, and in every direction was tall, brown grass. We're not in the forest, she said. She had never been outside the forest before. The idea staggered her. She reached out to grab a stalk of the tall grass, and it broke in her hand, dry and brittle. The soil, too, was dusty and cracked. Even the one tree she made out grew stunted, the parched ground exposing its dried-out roots. This land looks blighted, Naomi said. Abeni agreed. She turned to Asha. Which way now? The small girl was kneeling, her hands playing with the cracked earth. When she looked up, her face was worried. Her dark eyes gazed out as she tilted her chin into the distance, and they began to walk. This dry grassland was hard to travel. There was no water. The few trees they met had no fruit, and there was not much to eat. The panther girl went hunting, returning with some scrawny lizards. Even Naomi had a hard time finding food under rocks. Abeni made sure she and Asha ate and drank very little to conserve what they had in the bag. That first night out on the plain felt strange. In the forest, there were all kinds of sounds. Out here, it was quiet. Not even chirping insects. It only grew worse. And after 2 days, the harshness took its toll. Abeni plodded along wearily. She wore Obi's wide-brimmed wood hat to block out the burning sun. The air was so dry and hot, it was hard to breathe, and sweat soaked her clothes. Asha had undergone a strange change as well. She was no longer the happy and skipping little girl. She barely talked, only nodding each time Abeni asked if they were traveling the right way. She slept a lot, and Abeni was forced to carry her much of the time. Even her thick locks had gone limp. Naomi walked beside them, her quills and face drooping. For once, she didn't do much talking. Even Zania looked tired. She trotted through the brittle grass in panther form, her sides heaving. They were on their last gourd of water when Zania suddenly stopped, her ears perking up. Without a word, she bounded off, leaving them behind. After what seemed a long while, the panther girl returned, shifting to her near-human form. A mortal village, she panted. Not far, in a valley. Abeni inhaled sharply. A valley. Asha, is that where your sister is? The girl stirred awake to look up and nod faintly. A wave of relief swept through Abeni. After all this time, they'd arrived. Let's go. I'm sure they'll have water. She paused, looking over the two girls, Zania's orange eyes and Naomi's quills. Only, I don't know how people might react at seeing two spirits. They know Asha's sister, Naomi countered. Like your village. My village knew an old woman. She never looked like you two. Zania made a face before closing her eyes and breathing deep. As Abeni watched, the panther girl changed into the quite pretty girl she'd found in a trap. She flashed a smile with no sharp teeth and spoke with not a hint of a growl in her voice. I've been around mortals enough to know what they prefer. I can do that, Naomi declared. She closed her eyes and frowned in concentration. Slowly, the quills on her body disappeared, replaced with brown skin. The slight fur on her face vanished, and she was left with a short crop of dark curly hair. Opening her eyes showed pupils still a bit large but normal enough. She beamed proudly. Abeni stared at the porcupine girl with raised eyebrows. She had managed to look quite human all over, which was clearly visible since she wore no clothes. Naomi, did you forget something? Zania snickered. The porcupine girl glanced down with a shrug. I've seen mortals before that don't wear as much clothes as you do. But they still wear something, Abeni said. The porcupine girl rolled her eyes. Fine. She inhaled, and a pink mist formed about her, shaping into a wrapped dress with stripes of white and brown, much like her quills. Better? Better, Abeni nodded. With Zania leading the way, they started their trek to the mortal village. It sat right in the middle of the valley, shimmering in the heat. As they got closer, they could make out a short stone wall, then houses, small and bleached white with pointed roofs of wood and straw, as colorless as this land. Abeni drew a deep breath at the sight. She'd never been in a village other than her own. This one was smaller, true, but it was still a village with people and families. She wondered if they had harvest festivals too. A jumble of emotions ran through her, and she felt momentarily overwhelmed. You coming? Zania asked, eyeing her curiously. Shaking her head to clear it, Abeni nodded. She stepped forward past a low wall of fitted-together stones into the outskirts of the village, Asha cradled in her arms. Zania sniffed, looking around pensively. "What is it?" Abeni asked. "This place," the panther girl said. "It smells odd." Abeni could smell nothing, just the dry scent of dust that swirled in the air and settled onto everything. They continued walking. There were people. All stopped to gape at the four girls. Some gasped. A few even backed away. Abeni stared up at the many faces peering down at them. They were gaunt, like the unnaturally thin bodies that showed beneath tattered clothing. Their wide eyes all carried a haunted look. She'd never seen people so grim. "What's the matter with these mortals?" Naomi whispered. "They look as wilted as this land." Abeni shook her head. More than once she tried to talk to someone, hoping to ask after Asha's sister. Maybe, as in her village, they knew her as an old woman or a witch, but everyone refused to meet her eyes. She had begun to wonder if they'd come to a village of ghosts when she saw someone walking towards them. It was a woman, no older than Abeni's own mother, but her face was so sunken it made her age hard to tell. Her dark skin was covered in a light dust like everyone's here, as was her plain brown dress of rough-looking cloth. Thin copper loops wrapped her forearms from wrist to elbow, while a single band the same color circled her neck. Her cheeks were adorned with intricate scars, while her hair was braided tight to her scalp in rings from top to bottom. She took careful steps to reach them, even as others turned away. "I have water if you like," she said. "Yes, Auntie," Abeni nodded quickly. "We are very thirsty." The woman turned, looking about nervously before beckoning them to follow. She led them through the narrow, dusty streets to a house much like the others. A part of the straw roof had fallen in and spidery cracks showed in the mud brick. She took them inside, entering a room so small they were forced to crouch. An assortment of items, dried roots and plants and leather pouches dotted the wall, fitted into small holes. The smell of them tickled Abeni's nostrils. It was enough to make Asha stir, her nose scrunching. At sight of the small girl, the woman's eyes softened. "That one is only a baby," she whispered, scooping a cup into an earthen jar. She brought out some water. Abeni gladly accepted, putting some to Asha's lips. The woman filled up several more cups for the rest of them. She sat and stared while they drank. On her lap, her fingers played absently with one another, like she was trying to stop from reaching out to touch them. "Thank you, Auntie," Abeni said again, wiping Asha's dusty face with some of the water. The girl had come awake, peeking through her locks to take in the small space with interest. "My name is Abeni. This is—" "Where do you come from?" the woman cut in. "From the Djembe forest," Abeni answered. There was no reason to lie. The woman frowned. "That is a long way from here. My people say only bush ghosts live in that forest. How did you make it across the savannah?" "Bush ghosts? This probably wasn't the time to explain about secret veils and magic doors. We've walked a long time," Abeni said. "Can you tell us where we are?" "The village of Kono," the woman answered. Abeni had never heard of such a place. "You're a healer, Auntie." She gestured to the many items tucked into spaces in the wall. The woman nodded. "You have a good eye." "I knew someone," Abeni explained. "An old woman who kept roots and plants. She was good at healing, too. Do you have someone like that here in your village? A woman, a very big woman who takes care of you?" The woman shook her head, looking perplexed. "We have no one like that here." Abeni tried again. Maybe, Auntie, you don't think of her as a woman. Maybe you think of her as a witch? The woman's eyes widened in alarm. We have no witches here. Abeni worried she might have said the wrong thing. Most people, after all, didn't take kindly to witches. She was set to try another question, but Zania broke in first. What is wrong with this land? The girl asked. Everything looks dead. Abeni winced at the bluntness, but she had similar questions. This valley was once a lush place, the woman answered. Our village grew food to feed us and to trade. We grazed the finest goats and sold their pelts. People traveled from all over to Kono for these pelts. There was a hint of pride at the memory. But we have had a drought. Nothing grows now, and the last bits of green have almost vanished. You should ask some cloud spirits for rain, Naomi suggested brightly. The woman shifted eyes to the girl. There are no spirits here, child. They have abandoned us. Abeni shared a shocked glance with the others. She looked down to Asha, whose face now looked troubled. Before Abeni could think on this further, someone pushed through into the house. A man. His beard was peppered with white, and she first thought him to be the woman's husband, but he didn't greet her like that. There was an important way he carried himself that reminded her of her father, or a chief. He glowered at the four girls before turning to the woman. What are they doing here? He asked in a deep voice. They needed water, the woman replied. The man's scowl deepened. This isn't wise. I only wanted to see them, the woman countered. It's been so long. Her words faltered and her eyes glistened with unshed tears. But the man didn't flinch. Turning, he squared up his broad shoulders and addressed them. You can't stay here, he said bluntly. Leave. Abeni bowed low, her head touching the floor. If the man was a chief, it was best to show him respect. Forgive us, uncle. Did we do something wrong? He grunted, unmoved by her display. There's just been a mistake. Go, now. Abeni stared up at him. Then the woman, not understanding their odd behavior, perhaps it was just time to be direct. We came looking for someone, a woman, a spirit who takes care of the valley. The man scowled further and he shook his head. There are no spirits here, girl. You've come to the wrong place. Abeni's heart sank. That wasn't possible. Not after all this time. Not after all they'd been through. Please, she begged. We came so far. We just need to find her. We're so thirsty and almost out of food. The man's eyes softened for a moment, but his hard mask returned just as quick. Niyama will give you some water and food, he said, nodding to the woman. Then you will leave. Do not ask to stay again. Giving one last stern look to the woman, he turned and left. She released a heavy breath. I'm sorry. What I did was selfish. He's right. You have to go. For your sake as well as ours. Moving to a corner, she took out flat rounds of brown bread. She folded several into a cloth and began filling small wooden bowls with food from a pot. Abeni received them, placing each carefully into her bag. The woman looked on curiously but said nothing. Auntie, is there another village near? Abeni asked. Maybe Asha's sister was elsewhere. Not near, she answered, but several days' walk east. You will find one. Abeni gaped. Several days? Why, they could die of thirst by then. That's all I can give, the woman said, reading her thoughts. Now, you must go, please. Walking to the front of her small home, she motioned to the door. As they left, She looked each of them over, her face waging some unspoken struggle. "A safe journey to you," she said. Suddenly she leaned close, gripping Abeni hard by the shoulder. Her eyes were wide, and she spoke in an urgent whisper. "The day is almost done. When night comes, keep walking. Don't stop to rest. Keep going as far away as you can." Abeni stared at the woman in bewilderment. She nodded, and the strong hand released her shoulder. The four left the woman's home, glancing back to find her staring after them. They kept walking past the other hushed villagers who would not look at them until they had gone back out through the stone walls. Sunset came quick. Before they had journeyed very far, not even leaving the valley. As darkness fell, they found themselves out in the open again. Weary from the day, they stopped and rested in the tall, dry grass. "Those were the strangest mortals I've ever seen," Naomi said. She turned up her nose at the bit of chicken she now held, glancing around for any stray bug that might wander by. "The drought has baked their minds," Ania added, sniffing at the meat. Abeni had to agree. She turned to Asha, who was picking up bits of cracked dirt again and sifting it through her fingers. She hadn't spoken since leaving the village, and her small face remained troubled. Abeni leaned close to her. "Asha, are we in the right place?" she asked. "Maybe your sister isn't here?" Asha shook her head. "This is where she should be. She's very, very big." "None of those villagers have heard of any woman like that, Asha," Abeni said. The girl shook her head again. "My sister isn't a woman." Abeni's mouth opened, stunned. "What?" "My sister isn't a woman," Asha repeated. Abeni thought her head might explode. "But you said she was a woman," she sputtered. "A big woman. You told me that." Asha looked up. "No, I said she was very, very big." She extended her arms as she'd done many times. Abeni stared at the girl. How could she have a sister who wasn't a woman? She wanted to scream, but instead she took several calming breaths and tried to think. What was it Tutor had said? Spirits could look like anything. Some were smaller than ants, others as big as mountains. She looked to Asha again, really looked to where her small arms extended out across the grassy land, and understanding flooded in. "Your sister. She's the valley?" Asha dropped her arms back to her sides and nodded. Abeni's head spun. The spirit they'd come all this way to see wasn't a person at all. She was a whole valley. Sisters were supposed to look like you. That's how it's supposed to work. But Asha is a spirit, she thought. It doesn't work the same for her. Neither Zania nor Naomi seemed to take this news with too much shock. The panther girl only raked the ground with her claws and grimaced. "If this land is your sister, I fear she might be just as dead." "No," Asha insisted stubbornly. "She's not dead." Abeni reached down to grab a fistful of dry dirt, looking it over in her palm. If not dead, this spirit was certainly dying. "How can you be sure?" she asked. Asha bent over, placing her hands to the ground. Wriggling her fingers into the soil, she took a deep breath. "I can feel her. She's still here. She's still alive." "Can you talk to her?" Naomi asked. "I once had a very interesting conversation with a rock spirit." "It was probably just a rock," Zania murmured. Asha shook her head slowly. and sadly, she doesn't answer. Someone hurt her very badly. Someone, Abeni wondered. She looked out across the blighted land. Who could have done this to a whole valley? Do you think it was the people in the village? She asked. They were acting very strange. Asha's face turned troubled again and she sat back up. I didn't like that place. There wasn't anyone to play with. What do you mean? There was no one to play with, the girl repeated. Just sad-looking grown-ups. Abeni's eyes went wide. Only grown-ups. The village had only grown-ups. There had been no children. A mortal village without children, Zania pondered. That seems odd. No, Abeni said. Not odd at all. Asha, when she was the old woman, told me the children of her sister's village had been stolen away with a song, like in my village. Stolen? Naomi asked. Her voice dropped to a fearful whisper. You mean by the man in your story? The one in the goat horn mask? Abeni nodded. She'd been so focused on finding Asha's sister, she didn't even think to notice. That wasn't in your song, Zania remarked. Abeni turned to the panther girl. What? The word you just spoke, Zania answered, of this man in the goat horn mask also stealing away the children protected by this spirit we seek. You never told us of this, not even in your song. Abeni met Zania's unblinking orange gaze, which seemed to be weighing her. I haven't found a way to include it, she said. What do you think it means? Naomi put in. Will Asha's sister still be able to help us? How? Zania growled. She may be dust. Then what do we do now? Naomi asked, sounding distraught. Abeni shook her head. She wasn't sure, to be honest. Finding Asha's sister was why they'd come all this way. The spirit was supposed to take care of Asha. She was supposed to help the others find their families, and she was supposed to help Abeni find the people stolen from her village. But even if it was possible to talk to a valley, this one wasn't speaking. So what were they supposed to do? Had they made the right choice in coming here? The four girls ate the rest of their dinner in silence. After a while, they all lay down early, tired from their long day and lost in their own thoughts. When Abeni fell asleep, the unanswered questions were still rattling in her head. It was the music that woke her. Whoa. Asha's sister is land, a valley specifically. Wow. And now it's blighted land that is not dead, but is clearly dying and can no longer support the people that she was caring for. Wow. So like Asha, who used to care for the people in the forest, there came a time when without their full support, with being spiritually attacked, that one spirit all alone couldn't take care of the people they had been taken care of for so long. Wow. And there's no children in the village. So although Abeni hadn't focused on that aspect of Asha's sister's story, it wasn't like she didn't know it, but she didn't focus on it. She couldn't fully grasp what it meant that the children had been stolen from Asha's sister's village the same way they had been stolen from Abeni's village. And she hadn't seen the aftermath of a village that had no future, because the children are the future. So that village had no future. How could it continue on if there were no offspring? If there were no seeds, what can grow? It reminds me of modern day things that are going on now. How, I don't know if it's happening where you are, but where I live, when you go buy fruit and veggies from a market, there's a lot that don't have seeds anymore. Seedless grapes, seedless cherry, seedless watermelon, seedless so many things, and in order to get seeded fruits and veggies, it's important to grow your own. But can you grow your own if the land is dust? If the land doesn't have enough nourishment and water to feed something to grow on its own? How can life continue without seeds, without children? Wow. So, the agenda of the witch priest, wow, it goes real deep. Because if you're taking away the children, you're taking away that village's possibility for a future. It's so sad. It really is. It even drained the spirit out of the spirits. Asha's drained, and it took away like her vibrancy, which she had held throughout every trial and tribulation they'd been through. But once she got to the land that used to be her sister, and seeing it that way, yeah, it was draining. It was draining the adults of that village. It was draining the spirits, who they were. It was draining to the land itself, all of it. It was a lot. So I wonder why the adults, well, clearly they've gone through something and their children have been taken away. So seeing 4 children, visibly 4 children, probably scared the heck out of them, and like they didn't even question it though. It was like, leave now before dark. So clearly something's about to happen in the night once darkness comes over the area. Music, the book is called A Beni Song, and I spoke of the Arikis and, how it helped Abeni to know her history, her story, and how traditionally a song invokes or evokes the memory of who she is, the foundation. It helps ground her. But that's also true for people who would do ill to others. If you notice, the man in the goat horn mask uses music and song to tell a different kind of story. And so I have a feeling that the music that is waking her up has to do with the witch priest and the man in the goat horn mask. Let's see what happens. Abeni opened her eyes, sitting up to breathe in the warm night air. She hadn't been dreaming. Someone was playing music. It started faint, but grew. A soothing melody that rose and fell in waves. It flowed all around her, tickling and insisting that she listen. She sat in her blankets, mesmerized, as it grew louder. Zania stirred awake, tilting her head to listen. "What's all that noise?" Naomi mumbled drowsily. Zania made a face. "Music, I think. It's not very good." "It's beautiful," Albany exclaimed. Her companion stared at her strangely as she stared back. How could they not hear the wonder in this music? Wait, had she heard this song before? A voice in her head cried out a warning. She might have listened, but something in the distance caught her attention. Someone was out there. Rising to her feet, Albany gazed into the dark, trying to make out the figure. "What are you looking at?" Zania asked, coming to stand beside her. "There," Albany pointed with her chin. "Who is that?" The panther girl narrowed her gaze. "I see nothing but the night." "No, someone's out there. A woman walking closer. She—" Albany trailed off, the words catching in her throat. What she was seeing couldn't be. She blinked, but the sight remained. "Mama," she whispered. Her mother was standing there, wearing the same costume she'd worn on Harvest Festival. She smiled warmly at seeing Albany and waved. "Mama!" Albany cried. The warning in her head grew to a shout. She ignored it, ready to launch into a run. Only something held her back. She looked to find Naomi and Zania to either side, holding her arms. "What are you doing?" "My mother's out there. I found her." The music was stronger now, insistent and pulling. "Have you lost your mind?" Zania asked. "There's no one there." "She's right," Naomi added, her voice worried. "We can see better than you in the dark. And there's nothing out there." Albany glared at the two spirits, then back to her mother, and she gasped. Now her father was there too. Nearby were her aunts Awami and Awomi and her uncle Tawayo. Her brother stood between them, grinning. He even made a face. "They're all here," she said, unable to stop her tears or her laughter. "I knew you'd find a way to escape. I knew I'd find you again." Turning to Zania, she pleaded, "Please let me go. It's all right. They're waiting for me. I need to go." "No," someone said. Albany turned to find Asha. The small girl stood staring up at her with concern. "I remember this from before. Don't let her go." Albany looked to her in shock, then to Naomi and Zania. She struggled to break free, but they held her fast. The music in her ears drowned out the warning voice, turning it into a muffled plea as her family beckoned. "Let me go," she shouted angry. "You can't do this. Let me go now." She glowered at Asha, the anger turning to rage that burned her skin. "This is your fault. You ruin everything. I hate you. I hate you." She was screaming now. Asha winced as if she'd been struck, but Albany didn't care. Right now she wanted this little girl to hurt the way she hurt. Then, unexpectedly, someone else appeared, walking toward them. It was a girl. Albany had never seen her before. She looked near her own age and wore clothing much like the people of the village. The others turned in surprise at her approach, but even as she spoke to them, her brown eyes remained fixed on Albany. "Hold your friend," she warned. "If you let her go, she'll be lost to the night." Albany glared at the girl, someone else who wanted to keep her from her family. "Here, have her smell this." The girl withdrew a thick black root from a leather pouch that hung from her shoulder. "Hurry, the song is stronger than you know." Asha took the plant and looked it over with interest. She gestured to Naomi and Zania. Abeni howled as she was bent down. When she reached Asha's level, the girl put the root under her nose and held it there. It stunk. She gagged, trying to turn her head, but everything started spinning. Her eyelids felt suddenly heavy, and she closed them as her family and the music faded away. Now I'm starting to understand why it's so very important to the witch priest and those that work alongside him to separate the mortals from their spirits. Because the spirits bring a certain balance to their lives, the mortal lives that they protect. They bring a certain awareness, a certain safety from the witch priest's agenda. So it's very important to the witch priest that mortals are separated from their spirits. I can't get it out. Specifically, the children. Because the older people would have some memory of spirits. But if you're a child and you only grow up knowing the witch priest's ideologies and ways of being and what the witch priest wants you to think and see and feel and hear and know, that's all you're going to know if that's what all you know from a child. Those spirits that are being left behind, dying away, are going to die with the old people, like in that village, how the grass is no longer green, it's like straw and withering away. Eventually it's going to die and turn to dust, and so are the people there. And with no children, their memories, their stories, how could they tell an oriki? How could they even sing their own song? They would sing the song of the witch priest. The witch priest's powers don't work on Zania and Naomi and Asha. Asha is a powerful spirit too, so that's why he's still searching for her. But who is this girl that didn't get pulled in by the song? Wow. Until next chapter.